Arabs and Muslims are usually victims of discrimination from other people with races and cultures that are different from theirs. When a person looks at an Arab, they think of the words terrorists, antagonists, thieves, etc. We too would feel offended if these words were attributed to us just because of our race. We know because we've seen many people who have been discriminated because of their looks, their personalities, their culture, and their religion. A common misconception about stereotypes against Arabs is that they started because of 9/11, but it was actually already there even before then. A bunch of Hollywood films portrayed Arabs as villains in their movies, or even simply as petty thieves. The situation was only magnified when 9/11 happened. Instead of simply being portrayed as thieves and villains, the assumption was that they were actually terrorists. Hence, the random screen checks at airports and the hostility that is present when dealing with them. Although it was true that Arabs were already stereotyped as the antagonists, let's talk about the event that blew the whole thing out of proportion. 9/11. The mastermind behind the attack was a Muslim, and that has changed the perspective of all other Muslims all over the world. Instead of hating individuals who were directly responsible for the terrorist attacks, the hate has spread, enveloping Muslims in general because of how similar they look. These stereotypes can also be blamed on the media because, as we already know, they tend to bias a lot of the things that they show to the public. A majority of the things that the media shows the public are negative things about Arabs and Muslims. They hardly show the good acts that they have done. And since the media is the main source where people obtain their information from, the message they receive is that a lot of Arabs, if not all, are bad. They hardly show the good acts that they have done. For example, the news showed a lot of coverage about the unrest in Iraq right now, but they didn't show how the Muslims were protecting the Christians all over the country. They didn't show how the Muslims formed a protective shield around the Christians who wanted to celebrate Mass and pray together, so that they wouldn't be attacked by the Muslim rebels. It's a heartwarming gesture and an example of how our two religions can interact and help one another despite their differences.
Because of its long lifespan and how a lot of people are into it, not many people actually put effort into trying to remove it from the face of the earth. People nowadays find racism and discrimination as normal. Some even talk behind the backs of people who are different without knowing their stories and their lives. Sure, many people have tried to change the world, to stop racism and discrimination, but without further help from other individuals, then that person's movement and efforts will go to waste. And nothing would happen to change the social cancer. They even mistake non-Muslims and non-Arabs for Muslims and Arabs. In the years since 9/11, and even before as well, many groups have become collateral damage in racist attacks against Arabs and Muslims in the US. Iranians, Greeks, Sikhs, and Hindus. A majority of countries have Arab citizens or devout Muslims. Many places all around the world have Arabs inhabiting them. One example is the USA. There are about 3.5 million people living in the USA who identifies themselves as an Arab American, according to the Arab American Association. This could be related to what Christians are experiencing in Iraq. They are persecuted because of their religion. Their houses are marked with an Arabic letter N to show that its residents are Christians. They are then either to pay the locals, convert to Muslims, or die by the sword. When we hear of these acts, we feel a deep feeling of disgust and hatred within us. This is also what Muslims feel every time they see one of their own get insulted.
So we've come to the conclusion. When people see Muslims, especially when Muslim women who wear hijabs, are often assumed to be foreigners. This isn't an ideal way of viewing them because some Muslims are Americans. They were born in the USA, but they are still seen as foreigners. At airports, they are pulled to the side for random checks nearly every time they fly. And more often than not, when an Arab or Muslim commits a crime, their respective communities have to shun them, else they look like they're sympathizing with terrorists. And I quote from an online article called About News that here's a thought. Perhaps if people in the media made more of an effort to know the difference between a Muslim, an Arab, a Persian, a Hindu, or better yet, a Moroccan, a Syrian, a Saudi, a Kuwaiti. Perhaps if everyone made more of an effort to see people as unique peoples from a particular country and culture, or better yet, as individuals, they would be less likely to commit atrocious acts against them based on assumptions. Perhaps they would be less likely to expect Muslims as a group to speak out for one individual Muslim. And perhaps they'd be more likely to understand that an entire mass of 325 million people who just happen to share a common language most certainly do not share a common perspective.